liberty and justice for all.
It's my pleasure to introduce the committee members of the Finance and Budget Committee for the 2021-2022 term. They are myself, JP Sam Duncan, JP Lance Johnson, JP Sean Simons, JP Chandra Washington, JP Jim Wilson, and JP Judith Yanez. For our first order of business, we need to select a chair for the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Patrick Deakins for chair.
Second. We have a nomination of Patrick Deakins by JP Wilson, a second by JP Duncan. Are there further nominations? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Our second item of business is selection of a vice chair. JP Johnson?
Yes, I nominate JP Sam Duncan for vice chair of this committee.
Okay. Second. I have a nomination for JP Duncan by JP Lance Johnson, a second by JP Sean Simons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman, there is Chandra Washington to ask
My
for
hand raised.
Did you raise your hand on Zoom?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
I nominate Chandra Washington for vice chair.
I second.
Okay. By show of hands, those who vote for Mr. JP Duncan, please raise your hands. Those voting for JP Washington, please raise your hands. JP Sam Duncan will serve as vice chair. Now the adoption of the agenda. I have 3 items that need to be added. 2 from last night's personnel committee meeting. They're items 21-0-017. That was the ordinance, the changing of various positions in the county assessor's office. I have item 21-0-019. That's an ordinance changing the juvenile probation officer and specialized officer. And then I believe we were all emailed a resolution today from the county judge's office for a grant for the, I'm sorry, I got my stuff. For the, the Round Mountain Volunteer Fire Department. That's item 21R-002. Are there any further amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the agenda as modified.
Second. We have a motion to approve the agenda as amended by JP Johnson, a second by JP Duncan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. So now, item number 6 is to review the responsibilities of the Finance and Budget Committee. Our responsibilities are to review and make financial recommendations to the condition of the county, and those include the county finances, yearly budget, appropriations, fiscal control, audit review, and monitoring of expenditures. With that, we'll move on to our monthly reports. Treasurer Hill, are you on the call?
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right, thank you. Hope everybody is well tonight. Just start out 7.1, the Treasurer Financial Summary. I put this in there for this is the 2020 year end. I just want to, in the first line, 1,000 general, you see 35 million in expenditures. I just want to explain that 4.5 million of that went straight into the general reserve fund. So it's not like we overspent revenues. I just wanted to bring that up. And down to 3020 911, as I spoke about last year, probably this year is probably going to start being a concern. You can see the expenditures far outweighing the revenues, but just something we're going to have to keep an eye on. 7.2. This is the treasurer financial summary. This is just for the month of January. General and road revenues came in over expenditures. Down to jail 3017. Expenditures were just a little over revenues. We did get notified that the state prisoner reimbursement has increased from $30 to $32 a day. Let's see. If you go down to 6002, right at the bottom of the page, there's 9.4 million sitting in that fund, and over the next 2 months, over 2 million from the assessor will go to the general fund, and the rest of that will be distributed as excess collector commission to the taxing entities. Let's see, 7.3. 1 cent sales tax, and for all the new JPs, we share this with the cities based on population. Of the 1 cent, currently we get 18.4% of that. But the new census coming up, that's probably going to drop even further. But I just wanted to point that out. We got in 740,000 this month, and that's almost 8% over the same period last year. If you look at the 2020 column, we were 7.99% over 2019, and that's the best year-over-year increase in 15 years. 7.4, the quarter-cent jail tax. Unlike the 1 cent sales tax, 100% of this goes to the county jail. They got in a little over $1 million. Again, 7.94% over last year. 7.5. This is just a breakdown of where the taxes come from, and I just pick out a few of them. You can see the big winner that has been a lot here the last few months is the internet sales tax, up 45% over 2019 at the same time. Bars, with the new restrictions they had on them that's now been rescinded, I believe they were down 75%. 7.6. This is the half cent state sales tax. This is collected statewide, and the formula has the state get 70%, cities get 15%, counties get the other 15%. And so Washington County share of all of that was 151,000. Actually down from this same period last year by just over 1%. 7.7, quarter-cent radio system sales tax. This was voted on last year. It's a 1-year tax and then goes away. We've collected 5 months with 7 months to go, and over $1 million each time, so it is coming in well. And that is all I have, JP Deacons.
JP Johnson?
Yeah, Mr. Hill, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
How many pay periods are there in 2021?
There are 26 pay periods in 2021.
You're certain, correct?
I am certain. I've counted it several times to make sure.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Treasurer Hill?
The only question I have for him is the 1.94% increase from 19 to 20. Is that indicative of the state as a whole? I know ours was the local was 7.99% increase. Is this indicating that for the state, it only went up 1.94%?
Are you talking about the half cent road tax?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it declined 1.02%.
Okay. It shows a 1.94% increase for 20 on 7.6.
Oh, 20. Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at 2021. Generally speaking, I mean, Northwest Arkansas's economy is generally better than most of the rest of the state. And so their sales tax may lag behind as far as percentage wise, what comes into us.
But I guess what I'm asking is, do we think the 1.94% increase is representative of the state sales tax increase year over year?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions by members of the committee?
Suki.
JP Hires, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I know I'm not a member of the committee, and this may not be the proper place to ask the question, but I'm just curious where we are at with the radio purchase. What's going on with that? Do we know? Do we have an update?
All I know is we have 5 million and something in the bank. I'm not sure on the other side of that, the expenditure side, what's being planned, or I just don't know.
Any other questions? Thank you, Treasurer Hill. Next up is the Employees Insurance Report by Mr. Nelson Driver. Is Mr. Driver on the line?
I'm here. Can y'all hear me okay?
I can, Mr. Driver. It might help if you would maybe take just a couple seconds before your report to kind of explain what this is for the new JPs.
Sure, be happy to do that. Washington County Employee Health Fund, number one, is not insurance. We are a self-funded entity. And just simply what that means is we pay health claims right out of the county checkbook. We do have 2 areas of stop loss for our health fund on a per claim basis and also on an annual basis as well to, if you will, pardon the expression, stop the bleeding out of the county checkbook. We're self-funded. We don't have a quote insurance policy per se for the county employees and dependents. This saves Washington County somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 to $900,000 a year over what it would cost to go to a vendor, an insurance company, and get a fully insured program. Washington County's been on this program for almost 21 years now and has been successful and has stayed the course. It's gotten to where it is solvent now and has stayed that way for the last several years, starting in 2017. Presently, the money that we have in the bank that's available to pay health claims for the employees and dependents started the beginning of the year, January 1, with $3,049,708 in the fund. It ended the month of January with $3,239,726 in the fund. Our goal and objective year to year is to maintain a cash balance in that fund of a minimum of $3.2 million. The fund waxes and wanes depending upon claims. The one thing about health situations, we can't predict claims. We have some trends that we can follow to kind of keep up with and this type of thing, but we cannot predict, catastrophic claims. The last 2 or 3 years, we've gotten hit with some pretty good sized claims. You get into situations with cancer and some other devastating illnesses like that hit that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the county's stop loss, where our responsibility stops, is at $175,000. Anything over that figure goes to an excess loss insurance carrier. So if you've got questions about that, just feel free to chime in and ask me as we go along, please. And as a result of that, we also have an annual aggregate, which when our claims total a certain level, which is several million dollars, then it goes to the excess carrier on that second stop loss. So we have a protection at a per claim basis, and we've got a protection for the entire health fund as well that we look at on an annual basis. The county presently pays in a dollar amount every month to the fund based on the number of positions that are budgeted. And that's regardless of if anybody is hired into that position or not. The payments are made based on approved budgeted positions. Employees pay a share of that as well. And obviously, if the employee has dependents on the plan, they pay the full cost of the dependent coverages. We also have several retirees on the plan. According to state law, they're eligible to do that. And the retirees that choose to remain on the plan pay the entire cost of the health fund program. That's the county share plus the employee share plus dependent share if there are dependents still on the plan with retirees. So they're paying 100% of the bill from that standpoint. So that's where we're sitting right now. We're taking a look at the fund, and we started looking at this early last year when the fund dropped down below $3 million, and we started looking at the funding formula. It's been quite a number of years since an increase has been indicated for the employee portion of the fund. And the numbers that we bannered about last year, about mid-year, was somewhere looking at an increase possibly of 5 to 7% on the employee side. That's 5 to 7% of the premium increase, not 5% out of the salary levels. So far this year, beginning back in November, that really is not indicated at this point. We'll be taking a look again at the solvency figures of the health fund at the end of the first quarter, at the end of March, to see where we stand at that point. JP Deacons, that's kind of where our benchmarks are, is looking at it on a quarterly basis to see what the solvency figures look like.
Thank you, Mr. Driver.
Yes, sir.
Do any of the JPs have any questions for Mr. Driver? Okay, moving forward to the comptroller's report.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Worthing.
Okay. 9.1 is the summary statement of operations, expenses by fund and department, comparing the budget to the expenditures for each of the departments. And at one month in, we should be a little over 8% if the expenditures are linear. But when there's front-loaded expenses, for example, you pay the entire bill for the year in January or February, then that's why some of the funds were a little bit or higher than 8%, is most of them were front-loaded expenses. For example, on fund general services, 1,118, they're 27% of actual expenditures, and that's because they had a $42,000 AAC insurance bill that they paid in January that puts their actual at 27%, but they're still in good shape for the year. If you go to page 16 for general fund, overall for everything, we're at 7.8%, and then the rest of the funds are special project funds that have their own funding source, and they spend within their revenue source. So those percentages are less important. And then the grant funds, we haven't carried over their balances yet. That's on the agenda for tonight. So that's why there's nothing showing on the grant funds over on page 18. And then the overall They're at, the bottom of page 18 overall for all the funds, we're at 6.6%. And then item 9.2 is the unappropriated reserve balance report. And unappropriated reserves are the difference between what's available to budget and what was budgeted for each of these funds. And then in January, the only thing that affected the unappropriated reserves was the January ordinance for the AAC dues. And the general fund plus the general reserve fund less the jail fund deficit has the net general fund at $5,400,000. And that's down at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And that's all I had for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Worthen. Any questions for Mr. Worthen? JP's? Thank you, sir. All right. Moving on to item number 10, discussion of the county's reimbursement from the CARES Act. JP Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had asked for this to be added to the agenda since we had not had an opportunity to have a public discussion as a quorum court about this. And I'm sure that everyone is aware that we have received a lot of correspondence about it, ranging from to allocate all 4.5 million into the general reserve, ranging to release all 4.5 million for rental assistance and all of that. And so my hope is that tonight that we can have a robust discussion so that we can hear everyone's thoughts on the matter so that as a quorum court, we can take action. So we know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know what additional expenses we're going to have. They estimate that it could take anywhere from a year to 18 months to get enough people immunized to even achieve herd immunity. So having said that, while I do believe that we should respond as a county in some way, I do not believe that it's prudent for us to release all $4.5 million for rental assistance and those types of things. So my hope is that tonight, like I said, that we will have a robust, a sincere, a respectful conversation so that we can get ideas so that we can enact some type of ordinance and take action on this $4.5 million that we have. So while I have the floor, if I may go ahead and just add my own personal thoughts.
Please.
Okay, thank you. So we've had concerns that there may be certain populations or certain groups in our county who may not receive benefits that are administered through FHA. I've heard that a lot, that there's a concern that the Hispanic community, the Marshallese community, and the Black community will not be able to actually have access to those funds as other people in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm proposing that we consider partnering with other community organizations. I don't know what that looks like if we want to partner with local churches, because I'm hearing that a lot of the churches have also used a lot of their benevolence funds. They've actually depleted them. I know that most churches in this area not only help the members of their church, but they also help other members of the community as well. So no one will be excluded in that way. So that's my train of thought. We know that we have to do something. We know that the answer is not putting all 4.5 into the reserves. We know that the answer is not just releasing all 4.5 million of it. So I hope that we can come to a general consensus keeping in mind that the answer is going to be somewhere in the middle.
Thank you, JP Washington. JP Duncan?
So I just wanted to give a little background on this, as I know we all have different varying levels of understanding of the funding. So I wanted to share my understanding of the funding. In October of 2020, we received the $4.5 million in CARES Act funding. That $4.5 million was part of a reimbursement. So that's money that we already spent. So I want to reiterate, that was reimbursement for funds that we'd already spent as a county as a result of COVID-19. The county actually incurred expenses in excess of $13 million. That means our actual cost above and beyond the $4.5 million reimbursement was over $8.5 million. That's what the county took on and was able to manage and deal with. So many have seen this $4.5 million as funding to be used as relief. I simply don't see it that way. This is reimbursement for previous expenses. Over the past months, the county judge, the judge's office, the county in general, my colleagues on the court, and I've received numerous emails on both sides. Some showing great appreciation that we haven't run out to spend the $4.5 million reimbursement, and others requesting that we spend the money immediately on relief. So as I've thought through this and prayed through this, it's very obvious that this is a reimbursement for money we've already spent. This is not funding to go and spend as relief. We are already in the hole beyond this, to the tune of $8.5 million beyond the 4.5 received. We don't have the money to go out and spend. So this is a totally separate situation from the $7.1 million grant that was received. So my proposal is the 4.5 million stay exactly where it is in unappropriated reserves. So I don't know what a proper motion would be, Chair, but I move that the 4.5 million stay where it is.
I don't know if there's a motion needed this time. Other comments? JP Johnson.
I'd like to echo what JP Duncan just said, and all you've got to do is look at page 19 of the financial report we just received. If we do anything but leave that 4.5 million where it is, our unappropriated reserve is under $1 million. That is totally unacceptable to me. So that money needs to stay there in my mind.
Thank you, JP Johnson. JP Wilson?
Mr. Chairman, there are just a couple of things that I would want to mention. JP Duncan has already mentioned that we have $7.1 million that's been brought in by the county, and we're working with two different entities to support the folks that have problems in the area of needing rental assistance. I'm not sure I understand why we think that certain people of the community wouldn't be eligible for that. It is my understanding the $7.1 million is for COVID-related shortages in their meeting their rents and so forth. So I'm not sure I understand why we think that certain members of the community wouldn't be eligible or wouldn't receive that support. The other thing that I would like to mention is the U of A Center for Business and Economic Research indicates that our unemployment rate before the pandemic was 2.5%. We hit a high in April of 8.6%, but in December we were back down to 3.2%. Now, the sales tax numbers indicate that Northwest Arkansas does a whole lot better than the rest of the state does. But I hope that our people are understanding that there are jobs available in Northwest Arkansas and they have the opportunity to be working. I hope they understand that. In addition, they mentioned, the U of A mentioned that employment pre-pandemic was 268,700. It hit a low of 241,400, and it's back to 266,000, almost the same level that we were at before the pandemic. Now, I agree with JP Duncan that we really don't know where we stand in regards to the pandemic. There may be more expenses that we have to bear, and there may be things that we have to just be on guard for. So I think it's completely prudent to use these dollars in reserve. And if a second is necessary for his motion, I second that motion.
Thank you, JP Wilson. Any other discussion from members of the committee?
I have a point of information. JP Johnson said that if we release this money, that would only leave 1.5 million in the appropriated reserves. That money is not already in that fund. I just want to clear that up, because isn't it 4.5 million that we already put in the appropriated reserve? The other 4.5 million is a different line item that says CARES relief. So I just wanted to point that out, that if we decided to use any amount of this money, that does not affect the amount of money that is already in the appropriated reserve. I just wanted to clear that up.
I stand corrected.
Or make sure that I understand it correctly, I should say.
Thank you, JP Washington. JP Yanez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Chandra, thank you for the courage of putting this on the agenda. I appreciate you. I know there's been a lot of misinformation, but I think that stems from the lack of communication from the Washington Quorum Court. And so we need to work on that communication. Chandra, you did mention nonprofit organizations in the area. So I have already communicated with Judge Wood. Since the pandemic, there's been certain organizations that have been working with the most vulnerable communities in Northwest Arkansas. There's a structure already set up. We have the outreach span to reach those vulnerable communities. So I've already given that information to him. The issue that I saw here with the responses, and as a nonprofit leader, when this pandemic first started, it was like, what are we going to do? Let's find the money, that passion and that drive to serve community. So I thank the community members for that passion, but there's already a structure set in place for that reason, to be more efficient and strategic in reaching community members. And from what I'm seeing from FHA and the Springdale Housing Authority, the communication that's being sent out right now is in English. And so there's a lack of outreach reach with that. And so when we start seeing other nonprofits do that have that reach span out of their own network is what we need to look at for that. And I know, Jim, thank you for your comment of why do we think that there's a need. So I work daily with families within the community. This is hard work since the beginning of the pandemic. It's exhausting, but this pandemic and COVID has hit families where they're devastated. Sick spouses that have died, mothers that are now staying home with their kiddos that can't work. And unless you're in tune to all this, you don't realize the impact that this money can have within the community. Now, I'm going to say, I don't agree with the full 4.5 million going towards this relief. We have to be fiscally responsible, but as a nonprofit, I also receive care funds. The easiest thing to get reimbursed is the salary line. But if you go down through that, how much of the salary was actually for COVID response? Because we did hear Sheriff Helder last meeting say, well, I'm pretty much, got that money for you guys. So now you owe me and we're going to take out of that pot. But in this whole care funds, once we're reimbursed, we're not restricted of how we can spend that money. But I do agree that we have to be fiscally responsible. And for our community members, as a nonprofit leader that has been doing this work throughout the pandemic, the 4.5 is easy money. The hard work that's just a drop in the bucket. We need to be able to find more money to assist our community. That's the hard work. So with your passion, I urge you to go out, because this already seems that the way the vote's going to go. To be honest, we're having a discussion here to be transparent, but we already know where this vote's going to go. So I'm going to tell you right now, we need to look for more money and then rethink, are these people that you're voting in office really in tune to your needs in the community? Thank you.
Thank you, JP Yanez. Any other discussion by members of the committee? JP Hires?
I believe Eva Madison had her hand up before me. If you would recognize her first, please. I've
recognized you. You have the floor. Do you want to speak?
Yes, I do. I just a couple of comments and a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. I keep hearing that the 4.5 million was a reimbursement. I'd like to know if we have documentation that shows that, because I would like to see what line items we're being reimbursed for. So it's kind of a question I have is, do we have access to that? I also want to say, you know, I have a unique perspective on what's happening because I teach in our community, and our community is in trouble. We have families that are losing their homes. I have students that I have lost track of because they have become homeless. I have students who have dropped out of school because they are having to work to support their families. So this goes just beyond a housing crisis. This crisis is going to branch out, and it's going to hit every aspect of our community as well. I keep hearing that we need to save this, like sit on top of our pile of money for whatever crisis may come. And I just need to say that the crisis is here and the crisis is now. And if we sit on top of this pile of money waiting for the next thing, we're ignoring what's really happening in our communities right now. And I find it unconscionable. I think that we really need to use the resources that we have to help these families in our community. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Irish. JP Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to offer a few thoughts. Number one, if the county had $13 million in qualifying expenses, why didn't we submit an application for $13 million? It's very troubling to me that we're claiming somehow that we're in the whole $8 million and we didn't ask for more. My understanding from the grant application is that we got exactly to the penny the amount that we asked for, and it was 100% reimbursement for salaries in the sheriff and the jail's budget. That is not expenditures that we incurred because of COVID. Those were expenditures we were going to incur regardless of COVID. All you had to do was listen to the financial reports from the treasurer and from our comptroller to see that revenue, despite being in a global pandemic, for this county is up and good, that we did not go over budget in any notable category. And so to say that we need to save this because we're out of pocket money is just perpetuating a lie, to be honest. We are not in the whole $13 million. All of that $13 million, all of this $4.5 million at issue was in our budget last year. And to say that we need to save this for an ice storm, federal taxpayers gave this money to the federal government, and the federal government gave it to communities to spend on COVID. And we actually have people telling us to save it for our roads and bridges. Meanwhile, people are out there in freezing temperatures tonight without a place to stay. And to say that the unemployment figures show something that, everybody can go get a job. Maybe you're not a single mom whose children are at home and who has a parent at home that is of vulnerable immunity and is not able to get a vaccination yet. Women, especially women, have been very hard hit, and our unemployment numbers are really bad. And so to say that these people can just go get a job and fix themselves is completely ignorant of the problem that is facing hardworking people in Washington County. We have people with vulnerable immunities that can't go get a job and work at Walmart. We have women who have to stay home with kids because of a lack of childcare. They can't just go get a job. Those people need our help. And it is really, really a shame that this body would rather sit on $4.5 million in case, we need to build a building in a few years, or maybe we're going to use it as an excuse to lower taxes. It is inexcusable that we are not taking more action directed to COVID with this money. I agree. I don't want to spend it all because we did have some legitimate expenses that were directly related to COVID that were not budgeted, like the coroner's need for an extra cooler for bodies, for more body bags, PPE that we had to provide to our workers. Those are valid COVID expenses. We did not have $4.5 million in those expenses. And we should be ashamed of ourselves. The people that are emailing us, telling us that, they're right. We've been sitting on this money since October, and we are not helping our community. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Madison. JP Rio Stafford.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is my understanding as well from seeing, I believe that I've seen the documents that for the reimbursement, we submitted already budgeted law enforcement salaries. I'm not totally sure if that's totally kosher or by the book, but that's how the state of Arkansas did it. You know, and so that's why we got that exact number. We didn't actually submit COVID expenses, which is strange. But apparently that's how Arkansas is doing it. We all just saw the comptroller's report, that last page, the unappropriated reserve balance report, showing that when you put together what's unappropriated in the general fund and what the previous quorum court last year set aside as a reserve, a general fund reserve of 4.5 million, you know, minus the deficit with the Sheriff's Department, that you get a grand total. We already have $5.4 million between the general fund and the general reserve fund sitting there right now. That doesn't include this 4.5 million. And just in terms of what are we supposed to save, I did some looking it up. The feds, the GFOA, the General Finance Officers Association, recommends that local governments maintain reserves equal to 2 months of operating revenue, or put another way, 16.7% of annual revenue. When you look at what we spent with the general fund last year, that means that we should be keeping in reserve about $5.4 million, which, surprise, that's exactly what we have right now. So we have our reserves. We have our reserves. You know, we don't have these expenses that we didn't get reimbursed for. Meanwhile, we have deadly cold this week. We've heard, it's no surprise, I put out a call on social media for service organizations because we haven't heard from them. We've heard a lot from the public, but we hadn't heard a lot from our agencies that are actually helping the public. So we heard from a few of them. We heard from the Economic Opportunity Agency. We heard from SOAR, which does after-school programs. We've heard from some churches. We heard from the Little Free Pantry, who is telling us that those are emptying out almost as soon as they're being stocked. So I hope everybody has read those same emails that I did. We saw someone who just does this like mutual aid group who sent us a whole slideshow in your emails with personal stories of people who are suffering right now. So my argument is we have the reserves already. We have the reserves that are recommended. If we want to, there's been some concern about, oversight and different things like that, spending the money outside the community. Okay, spend some of this money on vaccine distribution. Keep it within the county and our own county health department, working with UAMS. The faster we get the vaccine out there, the faster we're going to be out of this. There's other ways. If you look on the NACO website, that for folks who are watching this, the National Association of Counties, they have a whole page of resources of how counties outside of Arkansas have spent these funds on different programs: vaccine distribution, small business support, nonprofit support, economic aid, workforce development, rental assistance. And on the topic of rental assistance, that $7.1 million is actually a drop in the bucket compared to the true amount of need that's out there. Moody's Analytics put out new numbers last week for national numbers, but when you extrapolate them down to our county's population, it shows that most likely the amount of back rent due and back utilities due by renters in Washington County is about $38 million. And that's in line with previous estimates that I've seen that estimated between 23 and 53 million for our county. So we're going to need a lot more than 7.1 million in rental assistance. I've heard from the Housing Authority. No surprise, I'm a former Housing Authority commissioner. I'm in very close contact with those folks. they got, almost, I think $500,000 worth of requests in the first day that they opened their applications yesterday. In terms of the sub-grantees, why they're not, working, they would have loved, their whole plan originally was they thought they were going to get the full 7.1 million and that they were going to be able to do sub-grants to community agencies. Well, because the grants are only being portioned out in these small amounts, the housing authorities both only got 1.5 million to begin with. They're not able to do these sub-grants right now. In order to work with community organizations. I'm sorry, yes.
We're running into time. Can you please wrap your comments up?
Sure. So my final comment is that stabilizing the local community, helping the local community, it will help our own tax base. If we don't help people on the front end, we're going to be paying more on the back end in terms of lost tax revenue. Using money to stimulate the local community means more sales tax, and the rainy day is here right now. Thank you.
JP Yanez, did you have follow-up comments?
I did. I wanted to follow up on JP Rio Stafford comment on the vaccine. So being in conversations about the vaccine, I don't know if, because we can't have conversations in this quorum court about race and what vulnerable populations, are affected by the vaccine distribution, the outreach methods. I would not trust people's lives with the process in this quorum court, and that's sad to say. But I just wanted to let you know that there is a plan, and we do have big hitters that are currently working with ensuring that how that outreach method goes with those vulnerable communities. So I feel really happy about that, but I appreciate your concern about that. And I wish we could have more robust conversations, seeing which communities are affected, but I don't know that's a conversation we could have here in this space, honestly. And at this moment, if I can give one word of how I'm feeling with this whole process, it's hopeless. There is communities in need. There are communities dying, and you guys don't seem in tune with those needs. And I do understand the fiscal responsibility that we have, but we also have a responsibility to our constituents in Washington County. And I don't think that is hitting because you guys are not in tune with the needs. And there's nothing else I can say or anyone can say right now to even showcase that. So I appreciate you. I honor and respect your position, but we need to work on being in tune in community.
Thank you, JP Yanez. Are there any other comments by members of the court or members of the committee?
I'm a non-committee member.
JP Ecke?
Thank you. We received an email saying that up to 10% of the $7.1 million is available for administrative costs. I know that Angela Belford is appealing to landlords to waive their fees and late fees, so that way they were able to distribute more money to the people in need. I would say to those that are administering the 7.1 million, the 700,000 that's going to go to administrative costs, that they would defer that and give it to the people who really need it, rather than adding positions, well-paid positions, because this money needs to be spent by December 2021. $700,000 is a lot of money to use for administrative costs when it's broken down to maybe 3 people. So let's really consider the people and not the administrative costs. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Ecke. Do we have any more comments by members of the committee? I really don't see any action to be taken here. This would require an ordinance, and I don't know that anybody's drafted an ordinance this evening.
Chairman, I had my hand up.
JP Yanez, you've spoken twice on this issue. I believe we have rules that limit comments to twice. I'm willing to make an exception if you can be brief.
Yes, so Just want to let you know, nonprofits right now are at capacity. We are actually giving service for free with grants. So I understand that administrative fee is for us to build our capacity to be able to do the work, right? Because we are capped off. And I just wanted to make sure to say that it's not that we're, nonprofits are taking the money. It's just that in order to do the work, we need more manpower. So, but I could assure you that it's being kept in the minimum so that money does go to people in the community. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Yanez. I can tell that even members of the court in general, or members of the committee still have a lot of questions about where these funds are at and what they're doing. I would invite every member to reach out to the judge's office and other members of the community to get a little bit more informed here. With that, I'm ready to move on to item number 11.
Are you not going to take public comment?
They have a public comment session at the end. Can you please raise your hand to be called on for the floor? Number 11 is a resolution authorizing the submittal of an application to the Arkansas Unpaved Road Grants for the improvements on Hamstring Road. This is a matching grant that the Washington County government wants to apply for. I think it's a 100% matching grant up to $75,000. As the resolution states, it'll be for road improvements on Hamstring Road, which is Washington County 842. JP Duncan?
I move that we pass resolution.
Second that motion.
We have a motion to pass by JP Duncan, a second by JP Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Resolution passes to the full court. Item number 12. Item number 12 is an ordinance projecting revenues and carryover totaling $4,903,511.26 in various funds and appropriating expenditures of $4,903,511.26 to various funds and budget line items for 2021. This is a accounting housekeeping item that we have to do every year for carryovers from the previous year's budget to this year's budget. JP Duncan?
Chair, I move passage of 12.1.
I have a motion to pass by JP Duncan. Second by JP Simons. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? This will move to the full court. If you remember at the beginning of the meeting, I added a couple items. The first item that was added is item 21-0-0017, an ordinance changing the title and grades of various positions in the county assessor's budget for 2021. This was heard at personnel last night, and it was passed to the budget committee. Do I have any discussion, or I'd entertain a motion? JP Simons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding from yesterday's personnel committee was that this does not affect the pay of the individuals, only the title. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
JP Duncan?
If there's no impact to pay, why does this come to finance and budget? Wouldn't this just go straight to Corn Board?
That's correct. I spoke to County Attorney Lester about that this afternoon, and it being an appropriation ordinance, it was appropriate to come to finance and budget.
Okay, seeing that there's no impact to the budget, I move that we pass item number 017.
I have a motion to pass by JP Duncan.
Second.
Second by JP Wilson. All those in favor?
Aye.
This will move on to the full court. The next added item was item 21-0-019, and that's an ordinance changing the title and grade of Juvenile Probation Officer 2/Specialized Police Officer in the Circuit Court 3 budget for 2021. Discussion or motions? JP Duncan?
Was there any impact to the budget on this line, on this item?
My understanding is no.
There's no impact to budget, I move we pass item 019.
I have a motion to pass by JP Duncan.
Second.
Second by JP Johnson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? This motion, or this ordinance passes to the full quorum court. Last, we have item 21-R-002, and this was the one that was emailed out by the judge's office this afternoon. A resolution authorizing the submittal of an application to the Arkansas Rural Community Grant Program to assist in the Round Mountain Volunteer Fire Department purchase of gear. The Round Mountain Volunteer Fire Department had raised $9,087.50 to help out with the purchase of new turnout gear. This resolution supports them in receiving a matching grant to help them buy that gear. This is added tonight. This needs to be passed and turned in by March the 1st, so there's a little bit of, we need to get this on the quorum court agenda for this month and get it passed. JP Duncan?
First, I want to say thank you to the volunteer fire departments. Appreciate all the volunteers there that give their time away from family freely to serve the county, and also want to move that we pass item R-0-002.
Second.
I have a motion to pass by JP Duncan, a second by JP Simons. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This will pass the full quorum court for consideration.
Chairman,
JP Duncan?
I move that we add the last three items, so R-002, 0-017, 0-019, item number 12, and item number 11 to a consent agenda for the full quorum court.
Duncan's made a motion to add those items to the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by JP Johnson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those items will be added to the consent agenda. All right. The last item of business is public comments. We've allotted 12 minutes for public comments, 3 minutes per person. And we will see who the first person is. I will ask speakers to please state their name and where they live for the record before you start speaking.
JP Deacons, we have Nikki Beaver.
Ms. Beaver?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I just want to talk about the 7.1 million and the 4.5 million. One of the JPs, I think it was the JP, stated that we have just enough in our fund, our reserve fund now, which I guess is okay, but since we don't know what the future holds, oh, sorry, I'm from Fayetteville, I forgot to say that. But we have just enough in the fund. We don't know what the future of COVID holds. We don't know when the next wave is going to come. We don't know how detrimental it's going to be. So just having enough in there for 2 months doesn't seem fiscally responsible to me as a citizen. We've gone far more than 2 months at this point with COVID. And like one of them said, we have, possibly 18 months left before we get to herd immunity. So with the 7.1 million that Judge Wood and his staff graciously applied for and received, that should start the process and cover the needs for now. And having the 4.5 in the reserve fund can always be appropriated later if that need arises again, or if the 7.1 isn't enough. And I would also say, there are grants and stuff out there. If these other JPs don't think that being fiscally responsible and putting that 4.5 million in the reserve for the future is fiscally responsible, then they should go out and look for more grants that the county can use to help these people. It's not the county's responsibility to pay people's car repairs or, things like that. That's community outreach. So yes, I know those community outreach programs are also feeling the strain of COVID, but everybody is. So the virtue signaling to the other JPs, I think that's really unprofessional, and telling, everybody cares. It's not just them. But, I mean, the 4.5 needs to go in reserve. We don't know what the future holds. 2 months isn't enough. 7.1 million is plenty to get us started. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Beaver.
JP Jenkins, you have Monique Jones.
Ms. Jones, are you there? Ms. Jones, it appears you're muted. Okay, let's move on to somebody else.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, Ms. Jones, we have you now, Ms. Jones.
Okay, thank you very much. Just want to speak to the devastating financial impact caused by the pandemic has forced low-income, at-risk community members to choose between purchasing groceries or paying for household bills. We know that food is essential, and it's our belief that everyone deserves to have access to healthy food no matter what the circumstances are. I sent in a question and request if everybody on this quorum court was okay with members of the community starving because we're saving money. And I agree with JP Giannis that the communication for the rent relief needs to be communicated out in different languages, Spanish, Marshallese, and maybe even Laotian, because we have Laotians in this community. And that's why I don't think that that money being put up will be able to serve the community. It's also a reason why I don't think the rental assistance will reach everyone in the community. I'd like the quorum court to consider that these are actual people that we're talking about, not servicing versus putting this money in a bucket. So how do you justify for saying you're going to save money while people are homeless, hungry, and living in poverty and possibly dying in our communities because we want to save money in a pot? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Next public comment.
JP
Please state your
Deacons.
name, where you live.
We have Sarah Peace, and then we'll go to Sharon Stuthard.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Peace, and I'm a Fayetteville resident. I did have public comment specific to the CARES Fund. So first, I would just like to point out that, the county did receive these funds back in October, and there has been repeated, a lack of transparency to your community members, asking for visibility and transparency to what the quorum court intends to do with these monies. JP Deacons, by your own statement, it's evident that there's still quite a bit of confusion on the behalf of many of the JPs in the quorum court. I've certainly been on the receiving end of some of those ignorant responses. So when I look at the Arkansas Department of Finance and Administration, it is clear that this is intended to be reimbursement for additional accruals related to the pandemic in 2020. I do find it concerning that we had over a $13 million impact last year to our budget due to COVID, but we only submitted enough to cover salaries that were already budgeted for. And at minimum, if you're truly fiscally conservative, I encourage you to get your ducks in a row and provide some transparency on where that 4.5 million is exactly going, at the very minimum, in case you're audited at some point, because it's very suspect to several of your community members at least. I do want to point out that there is ample information out there, both on the National Association of County Administrators on how you can distribute some of these CARES monies. Locally, we've seen other counties create an ordinance for fund relief. They use their general reserve to fund that relief and then reimburse themselves with the CARES money. So what that would look like, you could take a portion of your 5.4 sitting in your general reserve, allocate a portion of that to general fund relief in the community, and then directly reimburse yourself with the 4.5 in CARES funds that you have available. So it nets out. I've heard several people talking about need to build up our reserves for a rainy day. We don't know what the next wave holds. People, we're in it. this is the eye of the storm.
You have 15 seconds.
Okay, so please get creative about at least pursuing an ordinance to increase the relief fund in your general reserve and then using a portion of the CARES monies to reimburse yourself for that.
Thank you, Ms. Peace. I believe we had Ms. Stuthard up next.
She appears muted.
Ms. Stuthard, you appear like you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
We're
Okay,
here.
good. Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Quorum Court and all of you, this committee, for hearing me tonight, in my opinion. And I want to thank the Grants Office, especially Sharon Lloyd and Teresa Soares, for their efforts in this office to build the Washington County funds. It's admirable. The amounts of the grants funding have significantly increased since this administration. And I'm excited that we've received over $7 million to help with rental and utility assistance. I understand Washington County Quorum Court is designed to physically responsibly run the county, and I appreciate the efforts to manage the grants that have been obtained for expenses for the county's needs. I do not feel like it would be responsible for the Quorum Court to distribute $4.5 million before distributing $7.1 million. The rush to spend this $4.5 million is unnecessary and, in my opinion, not responsible, since their deadline on spending the $7.1 million there is a deadline on that money, but there's no deadline on the 4.5. I also support the thoughts that the 4.5, the use of the funds, cannot be responsibly assessed. The needs past that spending that 7.1 cannot be responsibly assessed until you've spent the 7.1. And then once you've spent that money, you can figure out where you are and what you need to do at that point. I am concerned about the comments regarding nonprofit status and needs. While I understand the needs of the community, I also understand that the Washington County Quorum Court and the Grants Department primary function is to fund the county's structural and financial needs. Saying that, I again applaud the hard work from the Grants Office and the needs to provide nonprofit funding. I applaud the hard work from the Grants Office. And I do understand that there needs to be nonprofit funding raised. And those that have made the comments that have said that more money needs to be raised by the Grants Office for that, I disagree with that. I think that money should be raised by people that are trying to work for nonprofit efforts. And I think that if you want to work within the county, you can join the Grants Office if that's possible, to help them raise that money. But their primary function is to provide funding for the structural and financial needs of the county. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stuthard. We have a minute and a half left in public comments.
Okay, JP Deacons, we have Allie Brown, and then if there's time, Mike Landry.
Ms. Brown?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hello, Finance and Budget Committee members. This is Allie Brown. I've talked with every member of this committee tonight. I was actually able to talk to every JP on the Quorum Court this week, with the exception of 2. Many of you were candid with me and on average spent 45 minutes speaking to me, which displayed an incredible good faith effort to hear other perspectives and to be challenged. I commend our JPs for this, as I want to engage all of you in the future. All of you said that I was your first phone call about the CARES Act money. I find that this is incredible, given that there's such a controversy around this issue. It makes me wonder if the loudest voices are using the right strategies. Is the keyboard warrior more effective than the conversationalist? Moving on, JP Madison clearly highlighted the contradiction you all mentioned by discussing the high sales tax and reimbursement in the same argument. We have all seen the overwhelming interconnectedness of public health and economic stability. All of you JPs agree that COVID has been a wild ride for all people, regardless of socioeconomic positions. In your candidness and in your proving of your own understanding of what it feels to absorb financial distress, you all disclose that either you or yourself or someone close to you had to seek PPP loans. This seems perfectly logical and is a part of a symbiotic relationship that small business owners share with the U.S. Treasury.
The U.S. Treasury was responsive to your economic distress. In our conversations, there was a distinction that started to emerge. This distinction you made between yourself and the renter is an important one to observe. With this distinction, you see small business owners as unlucky, whereas you see the renter, which can be synonymous with essential worker, as irresponsible. One deserves a
Ms.
cash
Brown.
infusion,
I'm
the other
sorry, but
does
public
not.
comment time
What
has
the
expired.
public is saying in very different ways is that renters.
I would like to put a motion to increase public comment time.
I'll entertain a motion that has a specific time. Do you have a specific amount of time?
I'm noting the amounts of public comments that we have. I would say 12 minutes.
Second.
I have a motion to extend public comment time by 12 minutes and a second by JP Washington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Motion fails. We're adjourned.
Amanda, by the way, for a long time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you're ignoring those of us on Zoom.
I am giving preference to committee members.
You also failed to have public comment before every vote on every ordinance or resolution, which whoever is muting me, you are out of order. You are not the parliamentarian or the chair. It's very disconcerting that this committee wants to silence the majority of the quorum court, that you're all